نستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم أما بعد. I thank you all for coming, alhamdulillah, on such short notice. This is a lecture that I've had the honor and the privilege of giving several times now, alhamdulillah, dealing with the definitive word on the marriage of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa ala alihi wa sallam to Aisha bint as-Siddiq radiyallahu ta'ala anhuma. It is an important talk and an important subject that a lot of people are often misguided upon and misled due to the sensitive nature of the subject. So inshallah I will, it is a short talk, alhamdulillah. I should be able to finish it in about 45 minutes. As always, open the floor to questions. If you have a question as we're going through it, we'll definitely try to answer it. And I will also try to elaborate or repeat if somebody doesn't understand something as we're going through it. And I hope, inshallah, that this will benefit you and increase your iman and increase your knowledge so that you can better answer this question when you are faced with it, as we often are as Muslims. Bismillah, walhamdulillah, salatu wassalam ala rasulillah, amma ba'd. One of the authors, a very famous author, H. Montgomery Watt, he's written quite a bit about Islam historically. He's quoted as saying, of all the world's great men, none of them have been so much maligned as Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Meaning that so many great men that there have been, but none of them have been abused as much as the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and lied about. So what we're going to try to cover in this lecture, inshallah ta'ala, with Allah's mercy and His blessing, is firstly the noble character of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Secondly, the authentic historical records of his marriage to Aisha. Thirdly, the cultural views that were predominant in that era, in the era of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, specifically in regards to marriage. Number 4, the medical aspects related to puberty. Number 5, a medical understanding of what exactly is the disease of pedophilia. And lastly, we will try to explore some of the reasons behind the recent controversy and explosion regarding this matter and the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So we first begin inshallah by looking at what are our obligations to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So Allah He says in the Quran, "Rahmati wasi'at kulla shay." My mercy extends to all things. This is from Surah Al-A'raf, Surah number 7. My mercy extends to all things. I shall ordain it for those who do right and practice regular charity, and those who believe in our signs, especially those who follow the messenger, the unlettered prophet whom they find mentioned in their own scriptures, in the Torah and the Injil. For he commands them with what is just, and he forbids them what is evil, and he allows them as lawful what is good and pure, and he prohibits them from what is bad and impure. He releases them from their heavy burdens and from the yokes that are upon them. So it is those who believe in him, honor him, help him, and follow the light that was sent down with him. These indeed shall be the ones who prosper. And as I like always when we're reading the Quran, I always like to recite the ayat as Allah revealed them. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم ورحمتي وسعت كل شيء فسأكتبها للذين يتقون ويؤتون الزكاة والذين هم بآياتنا يؤمنون الذين يتبعون الرسول النبي الأمي الذي يجدونه مكتوبا عندهم في التوراة والإنجيل يأمرهم بالمعروف وينهاهم عن المنكر ويحل لهم الطيبات ويحرم عليهم الخبائث ويضع عنهم إصرهم والأغلال التي كانت عليهم فالذين آمنوا به وعزروه ونصروه واتبعوا النور الذي أنزل معه أولئك هم المفلحون. So we want to focus then on this last, part of the ayah, of ayah 157, where Allah says, it is those who believe in the Prophet ﷺ, honor him, help him, and follow the light that was sent with him. These will be the ones who are successful. If you want success, if you want to succeed in this life and in the hereafter, you have your prescription right here. It is a simple prescription, okay? To believe in the Prophet ﷺ, to honor him, to help him, which includes defending him, and to follow, defending his honor and the honor of his family, and to follow the sunnah, that the sharia that Allah Azza wa Jalla sent him with. This is your prescription for success in detail. So when we look then to the example of the companions of the Prophet ﷺ, in specific, in regards to how much they honored him, you can almost see it in your mind's eye, the sword of Umar ibn al-Khattab unsheathed and hovering in the air in defense of the Prophet ﷺ, even at the slightest provocation. We hear about this so many times, that someone would come and insult the Prophet ﷺ or attack him, and Umar would take that sword immediately out and say, Ya Rasulullah, just give me the permission and we'll take care of business. But the Prophet ﷺ, from his mercy and his gentleness and his understanding of humanity, he always told Umar, put it back, relax, it's okay, we can handle this another way, alhamdulillah. From the mercy of the Prophet ﷺ, a mercy which Umar ibn Khattab, he took on as well. Umar was disciplined and he was trained by the Prophet ﷺ. So when you look at the behavior of Umar in the lifetime of the Prophet ﷺ, you see this very hot-tempered person. Yet you look in the Khilafah of Umar, what distinguishes the Khilafah of Umar? Who can tell me? What is the distinguishing characteristic of the leadership of Umar in his Khilafah when he was the Khalifa? He was very gentle to the kuffar, exactly. He was gentle not only to the kuffar, but gentle with all Muslims, okay? He was forgiving. He was kind. He was patient. Okay, something you didn't see in the lifetime of the Prophet ﷺ. Where did he get that? He got that by living with the Prophet ﷺ, by watching the Prophet ﷺ over so many years. He learned how to be kind. He learned mercy from the Prophet ﷺ, as we all should. Or we look then to Ali ibn Abi Talib, radiallahu ta'ala an, who, when he faced the chieftains of the Quraysh, you remember when they wanted to kill the Prophet ﷺ, they had come up with their evil plan. They said, we will send one person from every tribe of Quraysh to go and kill the Prophet ﷺ while he's sleeping in his bed. That way, nobody can attack one tribe at all. It will be a sin that we will share all of us together, or a crime we will share all of us together, and that way nobody can oppose us. So Ali ibn Abi Talib, he volunteered himself and he said, Ya Rasulullah, let me sleep in your bed. In fact, give me your green shroud that I will wear it, so that when they see me in the bed, they will see the green shroud and they will think that it's you, and they will try to kill you. Instead, they will kill me instead. So he was willing to give up his own life, radiallahu ta'ala anhu, for the sake of the Prophet ﷺ. We look in Uhud, we see an amazing picture developing in the Battle of Uhud, specifically with when the archers left their positions, and Khalid ibn Walid, he went around and he attacked the Muslims, and the Prophet ﷺ found himself almost without any defense around him. On that day, we always talk about women in Islam, and people always criticizing and saying, oh, the women have no position in Islam. Yet what did the Prophet ﷺ, he would say about Nasiba, who was from the family of Ammar ibn Yasir. And so Nasiba was there, radiallahu ta'ala anha wa an ahliha ajma'in. That he said, I could neither look left nor right on the day of Uhud without seeing her there fighting to defend me, without seeing this noble woman, radiallahu ta'ala anha, fighting to defend the Prophet ﷺ, her and her family, radiallahu ta'ala anhum. Abu Dujana as well. Abu Dujana, he was one of the great and courageous companions of the Prophet ﷺ. He used his body to shield the Prophet ﷺ against the arrows of the disbelievers. So Abu Dujana, his body became the post for about 7 or 8 arrows of the disbelievers. All of that to protect the Prophet ﷺ. Yet when you look at the current situation that we are in today, okay, we look at this statement by Jerry Vines, a pastor he's actually from Jacksonville, Florida, when he was speaking a few years back at the Southern Baptist Conference, Pastors Conference. He said this horrific and ill-spirited statement. Christianity was founded by the virgin-born Jesus Christ. Islam was founded by Muhammad, a demon-possessed pedophile who had 12 wives, and his last one was a 9-year-old girl. Number one, he demonstrates his own ignorance by showing his lack of information, number one. So he demonstrates his ignorance. Secondly, he demonstrates his complete lack of manners, which is something which is not part of Christianity. We know this because of what Allah Azza wa Jalla says about the Christians in the Quran, and because of their history. Yet this man, he shows not only his ignorance, but he shows his foul manners and his lack of anything called a religion with this kind of speech. So what did the Muslims say in response to this evil statement? What did they say in response to this man's crime against the Prophet ﷺ? Instead of the sword of Omar or the shield of Abu Dujana, his body, one is nearly deafened by the silence of most Muslims. In most cases, the summary, we can summarize basically the response of Muslims 2 ways. Number one, either they completely deny the authentic hadith on this matter, or secondly, they remain shamefully silent when the issue is mentioned. They don't say anything at all. They just hope the person is going to change the subject and people will forget about it. But nobody rises up to defend the Prophet ﷺ and trying to understand what exactly is going on. When I was doing the research for this talk, it's actually a lengthy essay that I wrote about it that I turned into this talk. I was really surprised by the lack of information that was out there. It really required a lot of research, a lot of original research that you're going to see in this talk that wasn't found at all. And I was really ashamed by this, to say that how can we then call ourselves followers of the Prophet ﷺ when this is our response when the people jump up and they want to attack the Prophet ﷺ. So the enemies of Islam have different names today. They come from different places than they did during the life of the Prophet ﷺ. But their insolence, their vulgarity, and their lack of anything resembling manners or civility did not change. They are the same as they have always been. So then we change now to the noble character of the Prophet ﷺ, the Messenger of Allah, salawatullah alayhi wa sallam. So Allah Azza wa Jalla, He says regarding him in the Quran, وَإِنَّكَ لَعَلَى خُلُقٍ عَظِيمٍ, and beyond doubt, you are of an exalted character. And who is praising him here? Rabbul Alameen. Allah Azza wa Jalla is praising him here. And Allah Azza wa Jalla, He also says regarding the Prophet ﷺ's character and his conduct in Surah Al-Ahzab, لَقَدْ كَانَ لَكُمْ فِي رَسُولِ اللَّهِ أُسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةً لمن كان يؤمن بالله واليوم الآخر. Indeed, you have in the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam an excellent example of conduct for anyone whose hope is in meeting Allah and the last day. If you expect to stand before Allah on the last day, then no doubt you have to look to the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam for the best example, the best role model. When we look in the hadith, what did the companions of the Prophet ﷺ say about him? Anas radiallahu anhu, he reported, the Messenger of Allah was the best of all the people in conduct. Agreed upon. This hadith is agreed upon. Abdullah ibn Amr ibn al-As also, he reported, the Messenger of Allah ﷺ did not use indecent speech, nor did he listen to it. He used to say, the best of you is the best among you in manners. And this is unfortunately, sadly, a distinction of Islam that has almost vanished. Almost vanished. That we don't put any emphasis these days on manners like we used to. Okay? We're so rough with one another. Allah Azza wa Jalla, He describes the believers, those people that He loves, أَذِلَّةٍ عَلَى الْمُؤْمِنِينَ أَعِزَّةٍ عَلَى الْكَافِرِينَ. Yet today it is the opposite with almost all people. They are أَذِلَّةٍ مع الكافرين أشداء مع المؤمنين. So what we're supposed to do when Allah describes the people that He loves and they love Him in Surah Al-Ma'idah, in Surah number 5, in Ayah, I believe 56, He states, the description of the believers is that they are gentle and humble with one another, and they are strict and more severe with the disbelievers. Yet today you see people being what? Humble and meek and like sheep and like dogs in front of the people that attack Islam and attack the character of the Prophet ﷺ and attack his family, and yet they go into the masajid and they attack the Muslims there. So what is this? It is inside out, upside down. We cannot forget the importance of this, and I talk about it so often I sound like a broken record, but our manners have got to be better. This is your best da'wah to people. People, I'll tell you right now, the majority of people, they're interested in what you have to say about Islam. They're interested about the scientific miracles in the Quran and the history and all how Islam gave rights to women. But you know what? If we don't show manners to these people, it doesn't matter what we're saying. Because so many people around the world, they're accepting other ideologies because they say, wow, these people are really nice. So how can it be that our religion, our noble religion that Allah sent to the Prophet ﷺ, which is founded upon manners, where the Prophet ﷺ, he said, indeed I have been sent, as part of his main mission, he said, was to perfect manners. And he said, indeed a person will reach the status of the one who prays all night and fasts all day simply through his good manners. So we cannot forget that, and this is indeed the true sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. We are not following the sunnah if we're dressing like the Prophet and eating like the Prophet and making dhikr like the Prophet and then abusing one another and abusing our neighbors and abusing the people around us. This is the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. Even when we look through the eyes of non-Muslims, we see the great praise that they have for the Prophet ﷺ. Annie Besant, who was an author in the early 20th century, she wrote, it is impossible for anyone who studies the life and character of the great Prophet of Arabia, who knows how he taught and how he lived, to feel anything but reverence for that mighty Prophet, one of the great messengers of the Supreme. Subhanallah. And how true is that statement. H. Montgomery Watt, we started with his quote to begin this talk. He says, when the sources are closely scrutinized, it is clear that those of Muhammad's actions which are disapproved by the modern West were not the object of the moral criticism of his contemporaries. His contemporaries did not find him morally defective in any way. And it's true. When you look through Quraysh, what did Quraysh, when they were attacking the Prophet ﷺ, they said he's crazy, they said he's insane, he's a poet, he's telling the stories from the ancients. They never said this man is corrupt, he's a liar, they did of course say that he lied because they say he lied about Allah, but they didn't say that he was a liar in any other matter. They never said that his manners were bad. They never said that he was a barbarian. They did not find him morally defective in any way, subhanAllah. Continuing with the same quote. On the contrary, some of the acts criticized by the modern Westerner show that Muhammad's standards were higher than those of his time. In his day and generation he was a social reformer, even a reformer in the sphere of morals. He created a new system of social security and a new family structure, both of which were a vast improvement on what went before. He established a religious and social framework for the life of many races of men. George Bernard Shaw, a little bit more recent, has been quoted as saying about the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, "I have studied him, the wonderful man, and in my opinion, far from being an antichrist, he must be called the savior of humanity. I believe that if a man like him were to assume the dictatorship of the modern world, he would succeed in solving its problems in a way that would bring it the much needed peace and happiness. I have prophesied about the faith of Muhammad that it would be acceptable to the Europe of tomorrow as it is beginning to be acceptable to the Europe of today," words that did have indeed come true. And even Gandhi, as much as he is praised by the West, this is his praise for the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The rigid simplicity, the utter self-effacement of the Prophet, the scrupulous regard for pledges, his intense devotion to his friends and followers, his intrepidity, his fearlessness, his absolute trust in God and in his own mission. These, and not the sword, carried everything before them and surmounted every obstacle. When I closed the second volume of his biography, I was sorry there was not more for me to read of that great life. So we can see indeed how respected the Prophet ﷺ was. The ultimate respect, and no respect needs to be discussed after that, is the honor the Prophet ﷺ was given by Allah in the Quran, and the love of his companions, the respect of his enemies, and even the respect that he has received throughout time, throughout the centuries that have come after him. So now we come to the matter at hand, the historical record of his marriage to Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha. Aisha bint Abu Bakr was the third wife, not the last wife as Mr. Jerry Vines would want everyone else to believe. She was the third wife of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, and he married her late in his life. Prior to his marriage to Aisha, the Prophet's first and only wife for over 20 years was Khadija bint al-Khuwaylid, who was about 15 years older than him in the most authentic sources. When we look at his life with Khadija, we see that the revelation of the Quran from Allah Azza wa Jal began during his marriage to Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha. He was blessed with all of his children through her. The Prophet ﷺ never had any other wives while he was married to Khadija until her death, at which time he was about 46 years old. So when Khadija died, he was 46. He spent all of his youth, all of his passion with her. So when we look at his marriage to Aisha, the Prophet ﷺ was just over 50 years old when he married Aisha. Okay? So he married her in Mecca or in Medina? Who knows the answer? You should know by looking at his age. He was just over 50 years old. So where did he marry her? In Mecca. Very good, Aisha. Okay? Just before the Hijrah, they were married. She was the daughter of Abu Bakr, the Prophet ﷺ's best friend and his most devout supporter. When we look at the authentic hadith on their marriage, there are many authentic narrations on this. There are 4 hadith narrations in Sahih al-Bukhari and 3 in Sahih Muslim, clearly all authentic, which have the following text. Aisha was 9 years old at the time that her marriage was consummated with Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Okay? She was 6 when they had been betrothed, in other words, when they were engaged, and 9 when the marriage, when it was consummated, when they went to live together. These hadith that we're speaking of were narrated by 3 separate companions of the Prophet ﷺ. So we have 3 entirely different chains, okay, going back to 3 different companions with essentially no variation between them. The text of the hadith of Bukhari in English is that Aisha herself narrated that the Prophet ﷺ was betrothed to her, zawajaha, when she was 6 years old, and he consummated nikah, his marriage to her when she was 9, and then she remained with him for 9 years. She was 18 when the Prophet ﷺ died. Are there other reports? This is always the issue. People always come and say, well, there's disagreement on the issue because there's narrations that she was 16 and she was 18 and, this and that and the other, so we're not really sure. And this is always, how people seem to try to wiggle out of this whole issue. Okay? So the other reports. A hadith with basically the same text is reported in Sunan Abi Dawud. So now we have how many? How many hadith? I mentioned Bukhari, Muslim, and Abu Dawud. How many hadith are we talking about? Not 4. 4 just in Bukhari. 8. Very good. So we have 4 in Bukhari, 3 in Muslim, and now 1 in Abu Dawud. All being sahih. All these are authentic hadith. Other texts which are written, which claim different ages for Aisha at the time of her marriage, exist, but none of them are authentic. None of them. Not one of these texts, not one of these hadith is authentic. So then the evidence is clear. It is undeniable. There is no knowledgeable Muslim who, following the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, who can reject it. Because you're going to reject, you're going to then tell us then that Al-Bukhari has mistakes. And there has been no scholar which has come and has said that there is one hadith in Sahih al-Bukhari which is defective. Not one hadith in its entirety is defective in Sahih al-Bukhari. So, on top of that, we have something else that's going to dig a little deeper of a hole, okay? If we're trying to wiggle out of this whole issue. Aisha also narrated another hadith which is found in Sahih al-Bukhari, where she said, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he said to me, you have been shown to me twice in my dreams. And so then we look now to the course of the marriage of the Prophet ﷺ to Aisha, and we find that his marriage to her was indeed one that was full of happiness, full of bliss for both families. It is something which is abounding in the hadith. There is abundant evidence for this in the hadith. The Prophet ﷺ speaks of his great love for Aisha. There is one specific hadith, he says, إِنِّي رُزِقْتُ حُبَّهَا, that I have been given from Allah the provision of loving her. He loved her so much. And the happiness that they had and the games they used to play and the general happiness that existed. Aisha was indeed his favorite wife after Khadija. She was the only virgin that he ever married, and after his death, she was and is one of Islam's greatest scholars. So much of this religion today is built on what she said, built on hadith that she narrated, built on opinions that she gave. She was consistently called upon by the companions for clarification on numerous Islamic matters, as we will see momentarily. So the next point that we go on to, inshallah there are no questions so far or confusion. What were the cultural norms that were existing in the era of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ? When we look at specifically people attacking the Prophet ﷺ, people have been attacking him since the day that he received the revelation, until he began the revelation. We know this. We look through the Quran, you find insults being, leveled at him, accusations that he was mad, that he was a sorcerer, that he was a heretic, that he lied. But nowhere will you find anyone, even among his worst enemies for the past 1400 years, who saw anything wrong with his marriage to Aisha. Correct me if I'm wrong. Anybody know of any single text somebody had an issue with this? There's not one issue. Nobody. They hated the Prophet ﷺ. His enemies hated him. They wanted to destroy him. They wanted to kill him. They wanted to burn down everything that he did. We're talking about from the pagans in Quraysh, from the Christians in the Roman Empire, from the Persians in the Persian Empire. So many people, they wanted to just erase everything that he did. Nobody said a word about this, even though his life was well known. These hadith being taught in Bukhari were well known to so many people. So then one major question comes up. Why? Why then only in the last 50 years, 60 years? Subhanallah, I think it's much less than that. I think it's only in maybe the last 30 or 20 years that this issue came up. Why did none of his enemies over the past 14 centuries miss this opportunity to quote-unquote expose him? So the answer we're going to find lies in the cultural norms of most of the world, in fact probably all of the world at that time. And the second part of this question we're going to get to at the very end. So what then were the marital practices of the 7th century? East and West, civilized and uncivilized, Muslim or Christian, monotheistic or polytheistic, the vast majority of the world in the 7th century of the Common Era, what people often call AD, so the year 600 to the year 700 we're talking about now, they married young. It was not only the norm in that time, but it had been the norm since the 5th century BC. How many years is that? From the 5th century BC until the 7th century CE. How many years are we talking about? No, not 200. Come on. 1200. Good. Okay. A lot. I like that. That's a good answer. It's a lot of years. MashaAllah. Yeah, that's funny. So, not 2,000 years, guys. It is correct 1,200 years. Okay. So, 1,200 years. 1,200 years, okay? To that point. But we're not done yet. It still continues on till this day. Alright? So add to 1,200, what are you going to add to 1,200? Yeah, another 1,400. Okay? So we're looking at about 2.5 millennia, alright, of this being practiced. 2.5 millennia of early marriage. Okay? Now let's get into some of the details now, okay? Get into the exact details. The Talmudic law. Talmudic law belongs to who? Very good, the Jews, okay? This is the Jewish law. So the Jews, they have the Torah that Allah revealed to them, and they also have the Talmud or the Talmud, which is the legal rulings of the rabbis throughout time, okay? So the rabbis fixed the legal age for contracting marriage at puberty, alright? So this was their law. The prevailing marriageable age for girls in Europe during the Renaissance was 12 years. During the Renaissance. The Renaissance was when? Give me a ballpark year. Renaissance was when? Come on, you guys. 1400s, 1500s, exactly, okay? So we're not looking at a very long time ago, 500-600 years ago, in Europe, okay, during the Enlightenment. The Renaissance represents the Enlightenment of Europe, okay? The prevailing marriageable age was still 12 years old, which was often considered pretty much the time that girls would hit puberty, okay? Furthermore, marriages were often celebrated among Europeans until well into the 17th century, okay? Between persons who had not yet achieved puberty, as was also true in India until very recent times. In fact, it still continues in India now, okay? That sometimes girls are married. In fact, I know this is very disgusting, but you all know Thailand, unfortunately, has become very famous in recent years for what? Right? Child prostitution, exactly, okay? Child prostitution specifically. So, disgusting, perverted men from Europe, okay, they fly, in America, of course, they also, as well, it's not just a European phenomenon, that they fly to Thailand and they basically have their way with little girls, okay, and boys, but it is primarily a lot of times with girls. And the problem for them, okay, these very sick people, they had a problem though. They were noticing that there was a lot of people coming, okay? A lot of people from these countries were going to Thailand for this. The word got around, and so a lot of people were coming. So they found a problem that they couldn't find virgins anymore, okay? So these Westerners, in general, started doing something with the people in Thailand. They started basically contracting with the families with babies. They said, you are going to save this baby. I will pay you right now, and you save this baby, and don't let anybody else touch her until she reaches age of 7 or 8 or whatever they wanted, or less than that in other cases. Okay, so that we have the first run at them. We don't want anyone else to have the opportunity to do this. Okay, so this is a reality. So it is not this is not a practice which has disappeared in entirety. Okay, but this is of course a diseased process. Okay. In India, right now, I'm sure there's people in here who have Indian backgrounds. When child marriages occur in India today, is this something which is seen as culturally normal in several parts of India? True or not? Or is it seen as a disease? Is it seen as a medical disease like a sexual perversion, or is it seen as something normal? We've been doing it for hundreds of years, and that's just the way things are, and that's the way they're going to continue. Which way is it? Aliyah, you have some information on this regard. Tell me. Good. It is seen as something normal, and that's the whole issue here. So we have, the reason I mentioned Thailand is because there are, we have to recognize the difference between the disease process, the medically diseased process, okay, of men wanting to rape little girls, okay, and the normal process, the culturally normal process, okay. It varies with culture. Very important here. It varies with culture. Okay, it may not be normal in America today or in Europe today, but it has been normal in many parts of the world forever. Okay, as it has been normal also in Europe, that this is just the way marriages worked. And these people, when they got married at the age of 5 or 7 or 10 or 12, 30 years later, what was their situation? Those people that have knowledge of India, 30 years later, what's going on? It's not really what I was looking for. I don't think that's traditional, Allahu Alam. They're still married, okay? Divorce is now a new idea, okay? That's becoming more common. But the typical thing, correct me if I'm wrong, the typical thing based on what I have studied and what I've seen is that these marriages last. They are marriages that continue on to the end of time. All right? You're right, sir. You're quite right. That sometimes the husband is a bit old and he's dead in 30 years, but in other cases he's not. Okay, but these are marriages which last until until the death of one of the partners is what I'm trying to say. Why am I making this point? Why am I making the point? What's the issue here about these marriages continuing? Think about it. Okay, it was normal for them to marry. Okay, they had fruitful marriages, correct. Okay, what's the difference though? What's the difference between the issue in Thailand and what's going on in India? Yes, they are recognized, that's all correct. So these were fruitful marriages, they were happy marriages, they were recognized marriages, okay? But the issue was they were meant to last, okay? A marriage is meant to last, okay? When people get married, all right, they are intending to live out their days with each other, okay? What's going on in the disease process, on the other hand, when people are involved in pedophilia, as we're going to come into a very extensive discussion of, are these things meant to last? Absolutely not. It is a sickness, and so they are different, okay? Exactly, Aisha. They're meant to satisfy a very temporary desire. They have their way. They get tired of that person, and they move on to a younger, more innocent victim. Okay. So that's the difference here. When we're looking at marriage, and we're going to come into this issue. Okay. We're going to find that out. Okay. So as you can see here from the Encyclopedia of Religion, that's the source for this information I'm giving to you right now, is that this is what they say from the Encyclopedia of Religion. We go to the Encyclopedia Britannica on the subject, where they say, we're talking about the English common law. They say historically the attitude of the English common law, which by the way, American law is based heavily off of the English common law, was that a person under 7 years old lacked the mental ability to consent to marriage. And that between 7 years old and puberty there could be consent but not consummation. Okay? English common law, we're going to find out, came about in the 11th century. In the 11th century. So here, just to kind of demystify and break it down here, what they're saying is under 7 years, really nothing can really be going on at that point in time because they just don't know what they can't understand. Between 7 and puberty, though, they could say, yeah, I think I'll go for it, but they can't consummate their marriage. They cannot move in and live together. So at common law, therefore, the marriage of a person between the ages of 7 and 12 or 14, depending on the puberty, was inchoate, and would become coet on reaching puberty if no objection was raised, meaning that it wasn't complete. Okay, so you can have an engagement at that time at the age of 7, but really the marriage cannot be fully conducted, cannot be fulfilled until puberty sets. Okay, this is English common law. What is the English common law again? It is the earliest structure for part of the Western legal system, formulated in 1066. Again, 11th century. How many years after the Prophet ﷺ? How many years are we talking about? A little bit less than that. It's a little over 400 years. Okay, a little over 400 years after the Prophet ﷺ. We're talking about the English common law saying that marriage can occur, engagements can occur at the age of 7. All right. By the 14th century, legal decisions and commentaries on the common law started to supply precedents for the courts and lawyers to follow. And as I mentioned, almost all of the common law has been enacted into statutes with modern variations by almost all U.S. states. Is the common law related to Christianity? An important question. As it opposed, because we're talking about religion here, okay? It actually is very much related to Christianity based off of the Catholic Encyclopedia. So the Catholics want to take credit for it. Whether that's, going to fly, I'm not sure, but that's what they say in their books at least. They say the common law of England has been the subject of unstinted eulogy, and it is undoubtedly one of the most splendid embodiments of human genius. And in fact, the common law, like I said, has benefited humanity in a great way. It was definitely an advancement from much of the law that existed, in Europe before that. So they say it is a source of profound satisfaction to Catholics that it came into being as a definite system and was nurtured to a great extent, administered during the first 10 centuries of its existence by the clergy of the Catholic Church. So I use this point because I'm just saying that now we have an indication here that the Catholic Church was in fact happy with the common law. So the Catholic Church, the foundation of Christianity, in other words, had no problem with people being married at the age of 7, as long as they did not consummate that marriage until puberty. You guys with me? So what then specifically is the Christian marital doctrine? Okay, the Church, again the foundation of Christianity, set the age for marriage at puberty, when girls reach the age of 12 and boys the age of 14. So girls, typically hitting puberty at 12, boys at the age of 14. So they said, you can't have consummation before that. But they said children could be betrothed, in other words, could be engaged at 7 years of age, although this would not be binding for another 5 to 7 years. Okay? More of the Christian church doctrine. If any marriage took place before the age of 7, the partners, not the parents, and the author says, although it would be very difficult to separate one from the other because we're dealing with a bunch of children here, all of them, had to confirm their consent when they reached maturity. Okay? Which means what? What is that saying? Who's going to translate that for me into English? What point do we take from this principle of the church doctrine? I made it easy for you guys. It's written right under it. That it did occur. That marriages did occur before the age of 7 in the church, okay, because the lay authorities accepted the church's doctrine on marriage, but betrothals and marriages did occasionally take place before the parties were 7, okay, and this comes from, the source for this is English Noblewomen in the later Middle Ages. Ward is the author, okay. So it did happen that marriages in Christianity, in Christian countries, okay, occurred before the age of 7 before. It did happen, okay? So when we go forward now until up to 1917, we're going to go very far into the, into the future from what we've been talking about. Not until 1917, under the Catholic Pio-Benedictine Code, was the canonical age of marriage in the church raised to 14 for girls and 16 for boys. So what we're trying to say here is up until 1917, less than 100 years ago, girls were still getting married at puberty, even under the Catholic Code, even under the canon of the Catholic Church. Oddly enough, this is not the law in many territories of the world today, including 8 to 10 U.S. states at the time that I wrote this, which was about 3 years ago, where the legal age of marriage is still 12 for girls, provided there is parental consent. So that it happened to be that in 8 to 10 United States, girls could still get married at 12 as long as their parents said it was okay. What's your evidence? Let's go to the next slide. Young Tina Akers. Tina Akers, 1998, became pregnant when she was only 12 by her 29-year-old boyfriend, Wayne. At that time, Tina was just out of the 6th grade. Parents, be concerned. Okay? Tina was just out of the 6th grade, not supposed to even know anything about that, and she was already having a baby because she had to drop out of the 7th grade when her pregnancy became more advanced. And this is not out of the supermarket tabloids, by the way. This is not from like the Star magazine or something. This is coming out of current news. What was Maryland state law in 1998? I don't know if they've changed it. It defines statutory or second-degree rape as sex with a child younger than age 14 by someone 4 or more years older. So basically, anyone who was 18 or older, if they had sex with a 14-year-old or younger, they were going to be put in jail. It is punishable by 20 years in prison. But there's another law, okay, that worked really good for Tina Akers and her family. Another law in Maryland state law which says children under the age of 16 with no minimum age, I repeat, no minimum age, could marry with parental permission and proof of pregnancy. So if the parents said it's okay and she was pregnant, then can't touch the guy. So this is not medieval times. This is not the Black Plague. This is not some third world country of illiterate savages, but this is the law in some parts of the United States of America at the turn of the 2nd millennium. Okay? So those evangelicals, those, base and mannerless evangelicals who want to attack the prophet I send them should better check the condition of their own houses before they start throwing their stones, because they're going to get hurt. And I don't mean that in a physical way. I mean that, as you're going to come and see, that they're only going to expose themselves is exactly what they did. Consent in marriage. Let's look at this issue now. Christianity. In Christian law, not until the 12th century, literally 500 years after the Prophet ﷺ, 500 years after the Prophet ﷺ, was the consent of a woman of any importance in regards to the marriage contract. So prior to 1140, the little girl didn't have any right to say anything in Christianity about who she was going to marry. Dad said, you're going to marry him, and that's it. Case closed. Don't like him, sorry. What about Islam? We have the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, more than one in fact, but this one should do, in Bukhari, where Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he said, a matron should not be given in marriage except after consulting her. A matron being a woman who had been previously married. And a virgin should not be given in marriage except after her permission. And the people said, Ya Rasulullah, how can we know her permission? He said, her silence indicates her permission. So, when Aisha was asked whether she wanted to marry the Prophet ﷺ, and she was asked, what did she do? She was silent. Are you guys guessing, or do you know of a text that says that? Are you guys guessing, or is there a text that says that? Yeah, I'm saying, do we have a text that says that Aisha was silent? Yes, there is. There is a text that says Aisha was silent. Okay, so this is part of the seerah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Okay, I'm not sure exactly where it is. I know it's in the seerah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So when you look up the seerah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam on this issue, it is confirmed. Okay. So medical aspects related to puberty and adolescence. Okay, so I know we're going to get off of the religion a little bit here. We're going to talk about medicine for a little bit. Why did the Prophet ﷺ wait? The reason that he waited, okay, the reason why he waited from the age of 6 until the age of 9 is because in this time interval, the girl reaches puberty. And this is evidenced by her first menstruation. Okay? So we recognize that a girl has reached puberty when she menstruates the first time. It is one of the first biological signs that indicates that a woman is capable of bearing children. Okay? So modern puberty information. We look at the American Academy of Pediatrics, very, very highly respected, very official board that certifies all pediatricians in the United States, very well respected on the international stage. They state that puberty is, quote, the time in your life when your body changes from that of a child to that of an adult, end quote. One of these changes in women is the onset of menstruation, and according to the American Academy of Pediatrics, most girls first get their periods between 9 and 16 years of age. So why is 9 important? We just mentioned that the American Academy of Pediatrics states that the majority of girls get their periods, they reach puberty between the age of 9 and 16. So why is 9 important? You're right, so it is a common age. We established that. How does that relate? Very good. Aisha was 9. Very simple. Aisha was 9. So the common, one of the common criticisms is that, hey, in Christianity, we marry our children at the age of 12 because that's, of course, the age that they reach puberty. So how could this savage marry this girl at the age of 9? He is, of course, just a diseased man. No. This is reality. This is an absolute reality, okay? that 9 is a typical age, and we're going to find out that not only is 9 is by no means the bottom age. Okay, so religious wisdom behind the wait. Why do people wait? Okay, part of the wisdom behind the Prophet ﷺ's marriage to Aisha just after she reached puberty is to clearly establish this as a point of Islamic law. There's a lot of benefits from their marriage, and this is just one of them. One of the legal clarifications which was made through their marriage is that it is acceptable to do that, even though it was already a cultural norm in all Semitic societies, including the one in which Jesus, alayhi salatu wasalam, wa ala nabiyyina salatu wasalam, the one that he lived in. Okay? So the question being, did Islam invent this concept? No. The majority of Islamic jurists say that the earliest time that a marriage can be consummated is at the onset of sexual maturity, or bulugh, meaning puberty. I will repeat that and I'll emphasize. The earliest time that a marriage can be consummated. The earliest time. Okay? So it doesn't mean the only time. It means it is the earliest time. So it can be done then, it can be done later. Okay? Also, this is the age in which a person, man or woman, becomes legally responsible under Islamic law. So people have to start praying by this time. They're responsible for fasting. They're responsible for all the things that are that an adult will be responsible for. And this is already the norm in all Semitic cultures, and it's still the norm in many societies today. So the question then again, was it unusual for Aisha to reach puberty at the age of 9? So according to the 1997 landmark study published in the medical journal Pediatrics, an American medical journal, nearly 50% of African American girls and 15% of Caucasian American girls begin to develop breast and or pubic hair by age 8, which are the basically the precursors to puberty. 50% of African American girls, 15% of Caucasian American girls. Okay, so this is important. Now, a very important and very surprising article in Time magazine, Teens Before Their Time. I strongly recommend that you all read it if you have the time. Go to your library and try to. I think I'll have the reference for when its date and everything later. But this is a phenomenal and very, very interesting, very concerning article written in Time magazine. They talk about Marissa Carter, a Galveston, Texas housewife. She could not believe it when her daughter Sharon, at the age of 4, started to develop breasts. The tiny buds that appeared on the little girl's chest were gone within a couple of weeks, but 3 years later, at the age of 7, they reappeared, and this time they grew, along with pubic hair and hair in her armpits. So after a series of medical consultations, the Carters, and these names have been changed, of course, put Sharon on Lupron. Lupron is a hormone, okay, that we use in medicine, usually for women, that slams the brakes on puberty. Okay, it is only to see their happy little girl go into terrible mood swings. She started having PMS. Okay. I had a child acting like she was in menopause, says Carter. The parents decided to stop the treatment, and by age 9, Sharon had full-blown breasts and was getting her period. If these were isolated cases, they might be chalked up to statistical flukes, but it seems as if everywhere you turn these days, outside schools, on soccer fields, at the mall, there are more and more elementary school girls whose bodies look like they belong in high school, and more middle schoolers who look like college co-eds. Young girls in the 5 to 10-year-old range with breasts or pubic hair, we encounter this every day or in clinic, says Dr. Michael Freemark, Chief of Pediatric Endocrinology, which is a study of hormones, at Duke University Medical Center in North Carolina. 5 to 10 years old. Okay. And I can tell you right now, as a doctor working in the emergency room, this has always surprised me. I've seen girls routinely that they come in, and I don't always look at I don't always pay heavy attention to the age. I usually have an idea whether somebody is, a child or an adult when I just kind of scan through the information before I go visit the patient. So sometimes I don't really remember exactly. So I'll go in and I'll see this child who's there, a young adult, I will say, and I'll be like, so your daughter is like 15 years old, right? And I'll be like, 15? They're like, no, she's 10. It happens all the time, all the time. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I go back, I'm like, this is not true, it can't be. Maybe they didn't understand what I was saying. And I go back and I look at the chart, and lo and behold, it is. The child is 10 years old or 11 years old, and they literally look like they're 20 sometimes, and they're fully developed. So why is this happening? Okay, and that was what the article focused on. So it presented the problem, then it started coming out saying, what do we do here? The question that naturally arises from this discussion then is promiscuous sex amongst our young, rapidly advancing girls the solution to the pandemic, as opposed to what those primitive societies in the past did in similar circumstances, which was early marriage? Okay, so the issue here is not in the water, really. The situation is their comments. I mean, if you want to look at it from a medical standpoint, they say that our society today is heavily gets a heavy diet of sex every single day. Okay, if you sit down once, okay, those of you that don't have kids or don't have little kids, just turn on like the children's programs. Okay, watch Nickelodeon, watch Cartoon Network, watch MTV or something like that. But MTV is still like high school age. Nickelodeon is still like your elementary school age and middle schoolers, okay? And see what's being shown on those channels, okay? See what kind of advertisements are. See how the children are dressed, okay? You look at like even subhanAllah, just there are hundreds of examples, okay, of just all these kids on these shows, and they're all, Disney Channel, another great example of the Disney Channel. What did these shows, they represent girls who are 10, 12, 14 years old. How are they dressed? Okay, they're dressed in short skirts and high heels, and halter tops and tank tops and whatever. It's surprising. So what happens is that children are seeing this. Okay, this is a stimulation for the brain. So they're getting stimulated from their own programs. They get stimulated from discussions of, sex education these days is being given to children at the age of 11 or 12 in schools. You see the things that are out there on the billboards. You see just the frank spread of pornography. I've seen, I was doing a class on the internet one time, and I saw that a lot of children's websites, actually, like Sesame Street and things like that, there are mirror websites with pornography with these names. So I don't know how it works, but somebody types in Disney and then they click on something and they end up going to a porn site. Why or how or what the purpose of this is. Yet the issue here is that young kids are being exposed to they're exposed to pornography. They're exposed to their colleagues being dressed in a certain way. If you go to a middle school or something like that, you'll see how people are dressing these days. So basically, all of this is stimulation. Okay, their magazines are like this. The things that they read. It's like, childhood disappeared. I think about what I was doing when I was 13 years old, not even 10, not even 13. I remember still being a kid. I remember still going skateboarding with my friends who were boys. I remember, wanting to play baseball and play football, and I was totally into sports and into skateboarding and video games, and weren't thinking about girls. We're not at the point where you're like, ooh, girls, that's disgusting. And it wasn't like that. Maybe that was the age of 10 though. That was what we were doing when we were 10. But now it's I'm not joking when I tell you this. I'm in clinics sometimes, and I've heard girls the age of 7 say, oh, my boyfriend. I'm like, you're 7 years old, for God's sake. What do you mean your boyfriend? 7 years old, when I was growing up, 7 years old, we're like, boys are disgusting. They didn't want to ever talk about boys. So this is, this early exposure, okay, causes a hormonal response. Okay, so they're noticing these girls are getting puberty at younger and younger age. So then the issue that comes out of this then, what are you going to do about it, okay? So you have a girl who's 12 who looks like she's 18, all right, and boys from high school or maybe even college are trying to, take her out, okay? So she has the body of a 20-year-old, but the brain and the intellect of a 12-year-old. What do you do? What do you do with that? What are you going to do in that situation? This is the question that's facing society today. what is the solution to this problem? Okay, so unfortunately, the solution, yeah, of course. I mean, the problem is the fasting is what we need to tell the boys to do. Okay, but the problem is that we're talking about men here. Okay, we're not talking about little boys. Okay, because the little boys are behind. Okay, the little girls we're talking about. So the girls are not, they're just getting roped along. Okay, because for a girl, it's a status symbol. Yeah, like a 13-year-old girl talking about her 17-year-old boyfriend. That's like a status symbol. Like, wow, she's so advanced and she's so mature. Wow, she's got like a boyfriend who's in high school and she's just in middle school, or she's in 8th grade and her boyfriend's in college. Stuff like that. And I've told funny stories about, little girls I see who are 13 years old in the emergency room who are having relations, consensual relations with 19 and 20-year-old men. Okay, this is the reality. So, what are you going to do in this case? This is exactly what this society is facing right now. The society is face to face with this question, and they don't know what to do, because of course they already said that it's barbaric to even consider these young marriages. Okay, yet is it that barbaric if it actually protects the child? I'm not sure. So then we look to the situation of Aisha. In sharp contrast to the exploitive relations I've been talking to you guys about, 20-year-olds, basically taking advantage of these young girls who don't know anything, getting their joys, and then running away. Situation like what's happening in Thailand. Okay, with these older men coming in, having their way, abusing these girls, and then running away. We look at Aisha. So we want to then understand what became of Aisha after she married the Prophet ﷺ. Was this a situation where he married her, he had a good time for a couple of weeks, and then he said, Abu Bakr, I think I'm going to give her back. It's just not working out. What became of Aisha after her marriage? Her marriage to the Prophet ﷺ at an early age let her be an eyewitness to the personal details of his life and to pass them on to later generations. She was spiritually and physically close to the Prophet ﷺ, and the marriage made Aisha an example to all Muslims, including men, especially women, for all time. She developed into a profound and able teacher and a scholar to be reckoned with, due in part to her remarkable memory, intelligence, and wisdom. SubhanAllah. Aisha, the mother of the believers, as she was named in the Quran, was not only a model for wives and mothers, but she was also a commentator on the Quran, an authority on hadith, and knowledgeable in the disciplines of Islamic law, Arabic history, and literature. For those who question the role of women in Islam, one needs only look back at how she was regularly consulted in countless and diverse religious matters, both during the life of the Prophet ﷺ and even more after his death. Amongst the companions' comments on Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha, Urwa ibn Zubayr radiallahu ta'ala anhuma, he reports, I did not find anyone more proficient. And we're talking about Urwa ibn Zubayr, the son of Zubayr ibn al-Awam, who was one of the Mubashirin bil Jannah. He was one of the people who was promised Jannah in his life. Urwa ibn Zubayr, he is the brother of Abdullah ibn Zubayr, the great Khalifa and the great companion of the Prophet ﷺ. This is not a nobody, okay? This is a very big somebody. And he says, I did not find anyone more proficient than Aisha in the knowledge of the Quran, the commandments of halal and haram, ilm al-ansab, and Arabic poetry. This is why even senior companions of the Prophet ﷺ used to consult Aisha in resolving intricate issues. So this is from Ibn al-Qayyim and Ibn Sa'd in Jala'ul Afham. Aisha was the aunt of, was she the, no, you're thinking of Hafsa, okay? So Abu Musa al-Ash'ari, he also said, if we, the companions of the Messenger of Allah ﷺ, had any difficult matter on a matter, we asked Aisha radiallahu ta'ala about it. And this is from Al-Muwatta. Asma. Thank you, Abdurrahman. Asma. My finger is not correct. Asma. So Asma was the aunt of Aisha, but not of the other way around. I'm sorry. That Asma was the aunt of Urwa ibn Zubayr, Abdullah ibn Zubayr, and things like that. So she is not exactly that Aisha was that case. So we can see generally in this case that the companions, they respected her tremendously, okay, and that they did not reserve her. Like, we don't see Aisha, sitting in the masjid teaching alif ba ta. We don't see her teaching, the little, 5-year-olds and 6-year-olds, little things like that. She was reserved for, for highest level matters, okay. She was the ultimate consultant when it came to matters of fiqh. So now let's talk about pedophilia. What exactly is that? So they're accusing the Prophet ﷺ of being a pedophile, so we need to understand what it is. Is there any justice in portraying the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ as a pedophile? The American Psychiatric Association further defines a pedophile as a person who over at least a 6-month period has recurrent, intense, sexually arousing fantasies, urges, or behaviors involving sexual activity with a prepubescent child. Okay, a child before puberty. And this comes from, pretty much the source, okay? We call this the DSM-4, which is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, 4th edition of the American Psychiatric Association. So this is like the Bible of psychiatry and medicine, okay, the DSM-4. We always go back to it to understand, these kind of diseases. Okay, so that's the authority on the subject. So let's then look at the Prophet ﷺ. So basically, let's quickly go back, repeat the definition. Over a 6-month period has recurrent, intense, sexually arousing fantasies, sexual urges, or behaviors involving sexual activity with a prepubescent child. So then we need to look at the marriages of the Prophet ﷺ. Did they fall under this case? Of all of his marriages, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the majority, 5, were to widows older than 36 years of age at the time of marriage. So 5 of his marriages were to women who were respectively 40, 50, 38, 36, and 36 years old. All of his marriages, except 2, were to widows. Of all of his marriages, the longest one was to Khadija, radiallahu ta'ala anha, and it lasted almost 25 years before her death. And of the remaining few marriages, with the exception of his marriage to Aisha, the brides were all between the ages of 17 and 30 at the time they were married. So as stated previously, his marriage with Aisha was consummated only after she had reached the age of puberty. Only after she had reached the age of puberty, making her an adolescent by definition and not prepubescent. So by definition, we're not seeing that, okay? We're not seeing this situation. Furthermore, we discussed this a little while back, that the difference between a person being a pedophile and normalcy is what happens after the marriage, right? So we all generally agree, and this is definitely a medical situation, we don't see pedophiles marrying their victims and living with them for the rest of their lives. What we do see is a repeated pattern of this disease, of this urge. They go from one to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next. There's no such thing as marriage. There's no such thing as I'm going to live with this person and develop this person and love this person and honor this person. Alright? So we can see the Prophet ﷺ did not do this. And secondly, we also see the result of his marriage to Aisha. So we spoke about Dr. Annie Besant previously, being an author who wrote about the Prophet ﷺ in the early 20th century. And she said, "But do you mean to tell me that the man who in the full flush of youthful vigor, a young man of 24 years old, married a woman much his senior and remained faithful to her for 26 years, at 50 years of age, when the passions are dying, that then he married for lust and sexual passion at 50 years of age? Not thus are men's lives to be judged. And you look at the women whom he married, you will find that by every one of them, an alliance was made for his people, or something was gained for his followers, or the woman was in sore need of protection." And it makes sense. Does a man who at this point in his life, who can have any woman that he wants, due to his status, he's going to go and then all of a sudden change like this? No. And again, does a man who has this disease, does he take this child then and develop them into a scholar? I'll ask you guys a question. When you look at people who have been abused as children, what do they usually turn out to be? In general, yeah, they can sometimes become abusers themselves, but in generally, are they normal people afterwards? In general. No, they're messed up. There you go, they're messed up. They got problems. Okay? Doesn't mean that they can't ever be cured. Okay? But they do have issues. Did you ever see one of them becoming like a Nobel Peace Prize winner? You ever see one of them, go on to develop a cure for cancer? You ever see one of them go on to be, a lead professor at the most famous university in the world? No. You don't see these things happening because these people have problems, okay? They have demons, okay? There's nothing wrong with these people. Many of them could have gone on and done a lot of great things with their lives. So there's nothing physically wrong with them, there's nothing mentally wrong with them, but the fact of the matter is that they are plagued by these images. They are plagued by what happened to them. They can't answer a lot of questions. They don't know what to think. Their youth was taken away from them. A great injustice has been done to them, and so, of course, they're going to have problems. So, of course, you wouldn't see one of these people developing into a scholar. Yet, oddly enough, though, the one arena where you are sure to find an abundance of pedophiles and sexual deviants is not in Islam, but it's actually where? Mainstream Christianity. So now we come to the closing. The reasons behind the sudden surge of today's attacks on the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. Why all of a sudden did they start attacking the Prophet ﷺ? The Christians are exposing themselves by this. It is the most amazing thing to see these Christian hooligans focusing their efforts on characterizing the Prophet of Islam as a pedophile at exactly the same time that hundreds, if not thousands of people across the world, not just the United States, are coming out of the darkness to detail the years of utterly humiliating and devastating sexual abuse that they suffered at the hands of clergy from every denomination of organized Christianity represented in the world. Okay? I feel really bad for the Catholics, I'll be honest with you. For the Catholic Church in general, because they have been unfairly, blamed for this whole thing. Because it is not just their problem. It is not just their problem. Everybody thinks now the Catholic priests are the issue, and they run to the Protestant pastor, okay, or deacon or something like that, and think they're going to be safe. And they're not any safer there. Just the Protestants were a lot better at hiding it. And maybe they paid off people a little bit better than the Catholic Church did, as you're going to find out. And now when I say Christian hooligans, I want you guys to understand something, that I don't represent this whole idea on all Christians. I'm talking about the ones among them in their leadership who are trying to do this. Because I will be honest with you that as Allah said in the Quran in Surah Al-Ma'idah, that He mentioned how وَلَتَجِدَنَّ I'm a bit tired, it's a bit late now, but from Surah Al-Ma'idah you will find the ayah where Allah Azza wa Jalla, He talks about the Christians, okay? And their love, okay, for the believers. That they share a bond, okay? And this is because they're not arrogant, because they have these people, these monks, these ascetic people who have dedicated their lives to worship. They've dedicated their lives to serving their God, okay? And for that reason, you don't find usually this hatred coming out of them. And so typically you will typically find, I mean, I grew up around a lot of Catholics, and I didn't find as much of the abuse that I found amongst the Baptists of today. So going on, the ayah that I was referring to is from Surah Al-Ma'idah, which is ayah 72 from Surah number 5. لتجدن أشد الناس عداوة للذين آمنوا اليهود والذين أشركوا ولتجدن أقربهم مودة للذين آمنوا الذين قالوا إنا نصارى ذلك بأن منهم قسيسين ورهبانا وأنهم لا يستكبرون. So Allah here in this ayah, He says, in Surah Al-Ma'idah, I remember, is one of the, regarding fiqh, it's the last surah to be revealed by Allah Azza wa Jal. It says, indeed you will find amongst the people who most hate Islam, you will find the Jews and the pagans. They have the most hatred for Islam. And you will find those who are closest in love to the believers to be those who say we are Christians. That is because among them are qissisin wa ruhdana, priests and monks. وَأَنَّهُمْ لَا يَسْتَكْبِرُونَ. They are not generally arrogant. Okay, this is of course an ayah which is general in nature, but I don't know what your experiences are, but this is Allah's truth and this is Allah's book, and for no doubt I have found this to be the case. And no doubt the largest number of people who continue to accept Islam year after year, day after day, month after month, year after year, are always usually Christians, okay? Rare to find the Jews to become Muslims or some of the pagans, but typically you find a large number of Christians every single day they continue to come to Islam. Because again, they have in their hearts, a number of them, the desire to seek the truth. And I think even on this website, I would think that of the people who are listening to this lecture who have accepted Islam, I would guess that at least 90% of you used to be Christians, or you grew up as Christians in one way, shape, or form or another. So this is typical. Yet unfortunately, I find the Baptists in particular and the fundamental evangelicals to be a very different brand. You know, they resemble the Jews in more so with their attacks. You know, with their disregard for any kind of manners when it comes to Islam, or talking to the Muslims. They don't seem like they concern themselves with trying to sit down and talk and trying to, you know, find a way to go forward peacefully, but they seem to want to break and destroy. And we shouldn't be like that. As Muslims, we should not ever be like that. No matter who you're dealing with, okay, you have to remember again, the process of da'wah is founded and it is carried by manners. Okay? Even those people who are Jewish, who have accepted Islam, and there are, alhamdulillah, a number of them, they are often won over by the gentleness of a Muslim, even in the face of attack. Even in the face of attack. And one time I was giving a program on television, and it was a call-in program, people calling in, and one Christian person called, and he was really violent and real aggressive with me, and just kept badgering me and attacking me and insulting, and I didn't even say anything to him, really. I just hung up on him, you know. I just hung the phone up on him, and I didn't really think about it at the time, but the people, the brothers who were working the television station or that program, they told me afterward. They said, you know, this is mashallah. They said everybody that you ever talked to on the phone throughout this whole program and the other programs you did, We were always really, alhamdulillah, really happy with the way you handled it. You always handled challenging circumstances in a very gentle and a very well-mannered way. But they said except that one. They said you shouldn't have hung up because that didn't look good. You shouldn't have done that, even though that he was very aggressive and things like that. So our manners have to be, we have to be the better person. Okay? Enough said about that. A lot of people say, I thought this was just a Catholic problem. Isn't that what we hear? What has been falsely represented in the American media as solely a Catholic crisis is in fact a global catastrophe affecting every denomination of Christianity as well as other religions as well, like Jews. Okay? Just some statistics. 131 Baptist ministers, 241 Bible church ministers, usually evangelicals, 82 Anglicans, Episcopalians, 37 Lutherans, 45 Methodist ministers, 19 Presbyterians, and 171 others. You know how there's a lot of Christian sects. Betrayal of trust, clergy abuse of children. This is a book. Although we find the numbers of molesting clergy staggering, our figures undoubtedly reflect only a fraction of these cases, notes Annie Laurie Gaylor, editor of Free Thought Today and author of the 1988 book Betrayal of Trust, Clergy Abuse of Children. It has to be stressed, she says, quote, it has to be stressed that many criminal cases are not necessarily reported by newspapers and that most cases of clergy abuse of children never reach the criminal courts in the first place. They are settled outside of court. Some other heinous statistics. Most ministers were charged with molesting at least 4 or 5 victims, not just one, but were believed to have assaulted many others. Okay? The sexual assault charges ranged from indecent touching to rape, sodomy, and child pornography. Much of the abuse was long-term, with some children assaulted as many as 1,000 times. A majority of the victims, 60% of whom were boys, were molested on church property or during church-sanctioned outings. Means, while mom and dad are at the church barbecue, having fun, talking with the other parents, okay, their son is being raped inside the church. The profile of the typical minister charged with molesting children was as follows. This is a profile of the typical minister. A 45-year-old man, ages ranged from 24 to 80 at the time of arrest, with 4 to 5 named victims, most often boys in their early teens. Most ministers, however, were suspected of molesting many other children. Conservatively, the 190 clergy in this one study had at least 4,000 other victims, for a low estimate of an average of 21 victims each. These children were not included in charges for pragmatic legal reasons, because they had been molested in other cities and times, or because the statute of limitations had been exceeded. Which means what? Which means that they could not be prosecuted for some of these other cases because of loopholes, legal loopholes. Not because they didn't do it, because they couldn't be prosecuted on it, because a certain court might be trying a case in Maryland and the crime happened in Pennsylvania, so they couldn't really go after it. Conclusions. The Prophet Muhammad was married to Aisha upon her reaching the age of puberty, viewed both in the light of absolute morality and the cultural norms of his time, was far from being an immoral act, but was instead an act containing valuable lessons for generations to come. Moreover, this marriage followed the cultural norms of all Semitic peoples, including those of biblical times. I didn't mention to you, due to the time, I didn't want to really extend this out too long, but you look even at the Bible, you look at, I believe it was, there's a number of characters of people mentioned in the Old Testament, men or boys actually who were married at the age of 9. Even one scholar said that regarding Maryam, they said she would have been married at the age of 12, just like everybody else was married at the age of 12 in her time. Okay? Based on this and other information elaborated upon above, it is grossly hypocritical for Christians to criticize the Prophet ﷺ's marriage to Aisha at such a young age. If they want to criticize the Prophet ﷺ, then they should criticize Joseph the carpenter, they should criticize Solomon, the king, David, and everybody else in their Bible. Additionally, it is important to note that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ has been sent as, amongst other things, a role model and example of excellent conduct for the believers. With this understanding in mind, one can look back into the Prophet ﷺ's life to see his example in many different marital settings, monogamous and polygynous. We also see his various dealings with his wives, as some were younger, others older, some were virgins upon marriage, and others divorced or widows. The point being said here is what? How many centuries in history now are we dealing with girls being married late in life? Okay? Look at all of history that we have in front of us right now, all of recorded history. How much of that history involves women being married later in life? How much of that history? Percentage-wise, centuries, however you want to report it. Very, very little. Very good. Okay? So, do you think it would make sense then that the Prophet ﷺ should be married to only older women when the question again, do you think it would make sense then if the Prophet ﷺ is an example, okay, that all of his marriages then should be to older women when the rest of the world is getting married to girls typically at the age of 12 or younger? Then he couldn't be an example, correct? He would not qualify as an example, because then they would say, this doesn't make any sense. Nobody gets married to women at that point in life. Who marries a 36-year-old woman? Who marries a 50-year-old woman? Who marries these people? The majority of the world is marrying girls at the age of 12 or younger. So what is the guidance of your Prophet on this issue? That would be a very reasonable, logical argument. And since the Prophet ﷺ is a role model for all peoples, for all times, it makes sense then that he should show them, here's how you deal with this issue. It is furthermore both unreasonable and impractical to judge societal practices dating back nearly 1,500 years ago by comparing them to the ones in the current age. It's just not right. Okay, if we're going to do that, then let's expand. Let's expand and let's start criticizing everything. Let's start talking about, Mary, and Mary didn't seem to have, we can talk about the fact that there was no consent in marriage at her age. In the days of Mary, the mother of Jesus, alayhi salam, they didn't have consent, so we're going to start, jumping back, so we're going to rip apart everything. It doesn't make sense, because that was a tradition at that time. We have different traditions now, and 300 years from now, if the world continues, we'll have different traditions from now. So in a time when the average life expectancy was nearly half of what it is today, an era where 15 and 16-year-old youth, like the companion Osama ibn Zayd, radiyallahu ta'ala anhuma, were sometimes made the commanders of imperial armies, the marriage of girls at the age of puberty was not only reasonable, but in fact the norm in most cultures around the world. Have you ever seen that in recent times? How would you like it that, for example, George Bush says, I've decided that I'm going to pull the George Smith from his high school 10th grade class because I would like him to lead the Operation Theater in the Middle East. Well, gee, what kind of things does George Smith have to qualify him to be a 5-star general? Yet, Osama ibn Zayd did a very good job at commanding the entire Islamic army as they went to fight who? They did not go and fight the trolls living behind the mountains of Ta'if. They did not go to fight a imaginary enemy. Who did they go fight? Very good, the Romans. They fought the world superpower at the time. So instead of talking about George Bush and the Middle East theater of operations, probably a better example would be for Roosevelt to say, I'm going to pull somebody out of the 9th grade and let them lead the U.S. armies in World War II. Or in fact, not just the U.S. armies, let's let them lead all of the Allied forces in World War II. That wouldn't make a lot of sense today. But it made a lot of sense before because people didn't really live that long and people grew up a lot faster. So, on the contrary, it heretofore remains unknown how modern society will cope with the current rise in early puberty among its young girls and the threat this presents to them. It may yet teach us the appreciation for the efforts and ways of those that came before us. And I close with the verse that Allah Azza wa Jalla, He mentions in the end of Surah Al Imran, Surah number 3, Ayah 185. لتبلون في أموالكم وأنفسكم ولتسمعن من الذين أوتوا الكتاب من قبلكم ومن الذين أشركوا أذى كثيرا وإن تصبروا وتتقوا فإن ذلك من عزم الأمور. You will certainly hear much abuse from the people of the book and the pagans. And if you are patient and keep your duty, then this is surely a matter of great resolution. We need to be patient, okay? Jerry Vines made a mistake. He did something inexcusable when he criticized or when he attacked the Prophet ﷺ and insulted him. He slandered him without any justification whatsoever. In fact, he only opened the door to the criticism of his own religion and to himself, his own ignorance. He only demonstrated his own lack of knowledge and his own lack of manners and his own complete ignorance. That's all he accomplished. Okay? That's enough, by the way. We don't need anything else. Death threats are not necessary. They're not right. Anyone who wants to do that understands that he is doing something which is un-Islamic. This is not part of our religion to, issue death threats and to go and physically attack people. Okay? He said something, and the response that needs to come from us is a verbal and strong response, because I will tell you right now that any time, just like you see, like what happens in politics, okay? Usually the politician is, having an affair, so then he has to start a war in order to divert attention from his affair. So when you're going to see, when Christians or anybody else start attacking something in Islam, look really closely, look at the big picture, and try to figure out what they're trying to divert attention from. Because usually you're going to find a huge mess under the problem. They're trying to cover something up. And in this case, it was just a little too coincidental that they come to attack the Prophet ﷺ at the same time that they are about to be, the whole church is being ripped apart right now. Christianity is being torn to shreds by the actions of these animals who do not represent Christianity at all. They don't represent the church. They don't represent the teachings of that religion. Although we disagree with Christianity and we know that they're wrong, we invite them to come and to accept Islam. We invite them to come and look at the beauty of Islam. We invite them to come and look at how Islam has maintained the truth of all that they believe in. So we don't agree with their theology, but at the same time they are people of the book, and Allah gave them that name out of a certain respect, because they are people who still implement much of the teachings of Allah. As you can see, even in the West, in terms of their laws, their general behavior of the people, and things like that. So when you see this happening, when you see certain groups of people rushing to attack Islam, look at the big picture and try to figure out what's going on, and turn around and expose them for what's really going on. This is the best defense. This is, in fact, the best offense. Going mad and acting like a fool in the streets, burning things and rioting and acting like an insane person, issuing death threats and physically attacking people. This is not part of this religion, and this is not how we prove our points. We prove our points, inshallah, just like this. And I hope Allah Azza wa Jalla, He accepts this effort, and inshallah that you all benefit from it, and then inshallah that now you have you hold the truth in your hands, inshallah, and you hold the understanding, okay, that you can then go, if somebody mentions this, you're not going to hide in the corner. You're not going to deny the authentic sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ like the rest of the people. You're going to say, hey, you want to talk about the Prophet ﷺ, let's sit down here. I'd love to talk to you about this whole issue. I'd love to show you how even in your own religion, you're going to start, if you're going to criticize our Prophet, you got way more to learn, because you're going to be criticizing your whole history. You sit down and talk to him like that, and then subhanAllah, people will respect you. and they will honor you because you are able to control yourself. And as the Prophet ﷺ, he said, the strong person is not the person who defeats another person in the wrestling match, but who is really the strong person? Controls their anger. No doubt when you hear the Prophet ﷺ being abused, being slandered, it is a natural part of Iman that you should be angry. It is natural. That's why Omar used to take his sword out. But it is also a part of our Iman to control that anger and to channel it into something beneficial and something civilized. And this is why I talked earlier about how Omar changed. Because Omar went from taking on that behavior of Jahiliyyah, let's take the sword out and kill somebody, but he grew and he progressed and he developed himself into a beautiful Muslim, controlling that and instead being so peaceful and so gentle with the people. Never weak, never somebody you could step on, but instead somebody that even when what did the church say about him when the Abu Ubaidah ibn Jarrah, he went to Jerusalem, the patriarch of the church in Jerusalem, he said, we will not give this key to this city. We will not give the key of Jerusalem to anybody except your leader. And when Omar came to them in the way that you all know that he did, in the gentle, humble way that he came, they said, yes, this is the man we expected from our scriptures. This is the man that's written about in our scriptures. This man. This gentle man. So inshallah, I ask Allah to accept it, and I apologize for, I know I took I added a lot more to this than I typically do for your benefit, and I hope inshallah that you forgive me for the length of time, and that inshallah that it was something that benefited you and will strengthen inshallah your understanding of this religion, strengthen your love for the Prophet ﷺ, and also strengthen your da'wah so that you present yourself in the best way, and then inshallah that you increase your manners inshallah to be consistent with what Allah has sent to us on the teachings of the Prophet ﷺ, through the teachings of the Prophet ﷺ, to be people of great manners. Barakallahu feekum wa jazakumullahu khair. Subhanallahumma bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta subhanaka wa atubu ilayk.